Hey everybody, hope you're doing well. First things first, I want to once again say thank you to all the people who came from my No, I Am Not a Human video. We've just reached 7,000 subscribers, which is kind of wild to say. I've been doing this weekly for over a year now, and it still kind of astonishes me that people, well, watch my videos, which I know is strange to say. I really enjoy doing this, and I'm glad you guys enjoy watching me. This week's video is cut content on a game that I personally really love, and I have a strong connection with. During quarantine, I played this a lot, and I really got into it. And that game is Stardew Valley. We're going to be covering Stardew Valley's cut content today. And in the future, I'd like to also go over some of the theories and some of the more lore-related things to the game if this does well. But before I get started, I want to talk about where I get a lot of my information from. Typically, it's a mixture of different articles and developer interviews. However, a lot of it winds up being chronicled by the Cutting Room Floor, which is a great resource that compiles a lot of this information. It's a great resource for someone like me who does not know much about coding or can't really go through the game files myself to be able to find interesting information for these videos. So without further ado, let's get into the cut content of Stardew Valley. First things first, I want to discuss a major part of the game, in my opinion, and that is marrying an NPC. There's quite a few different options when it comes to who you want to marry. Some NPCs are eligible and some NPCs are ineligible, meaning that you can still become friends with them and increase your relationship with them, but you're not able to marry them even when you get to full relationship, the full heart bars, I guess. Also, in case you're wondering, I know this is silly, my go-to marriage in Stardew Valley is Leah. However, I have a friend who plays this game a lot more than me and still very consistently plays it, and she chooses her marriages based on who's able to make her the most money on the farm.
Please just hear me out, please.
Which, that's the difference between her and I when we play these games. I'm having fun meeting the NPCs and just basic farming, and she's upset if she doesn't bring in a bajillion dollars each month. But the interesting thing that technically counts as cut content, or I guess something strange with the code, is the subject of trying to marry these ineligible NPCs. Initially, if you were to try to marry these NPCs in early versions of the game, it would wind up crashing your game. However, it appears that the code for how marriages work within the game has changed. And this has opened the door to making ineligible NPCs eligible. The way this works is through editing the save game file. However, I wouldn't mess with this code because it has some very interesting consequences. It kind of breaks the character. When you marry an eligible character, it changes their routine. Instead of following their normal routine, which would be, I don't know, for Leah, for example, it's staring at the water for this amount of time and then going inside and painting and things like that. Once you marry them, they no longer follow that routine and they live with you on the farm. If you were to edit the game code in order to marry an ineligible NPC, this same thing would happen. They would no longer be at their place of residence or follow their typical code. But you can see why this is an issue when you look at specific NPCs. Characters like Robin will no longer be available to purchase things from. This can severely mess with your progression. If you check the social tab on these characters, they won't be marked as married, which is simply because they were never meant to be married. And for those of you wondering, if you try to marry multiple NPCs in this fashion, only one of them will move in with you. It's typically if they have the specific spouse delegation, I guess. The other thing is, these characters lack any kind of special animations or sprites when it comes to actions that are specific to your spouse. So if you try to kiss them, they will simply look south, or sometimes a completely different sprite or image will pop up altogether. When it comes to the dialogue, they all draw from the same very basic marriage dialogue file, as well as during rainy days or special occasions where your spouse would say something specific to their character, they simply say ... which seems to be a sort of safety net if there is something missing within the code, I guess. No matter what, these ineligible NPCs if you marry them, they will never ask you to have a baby. However, if you tinker with the code or the save file in a similar way that you would in order to marry them in the first place, it is kind of possible to have a child with them. When it comes to the new routine that these ineligible spouses would have, it follows a very basic one. That being at 6 a.m., the NPC will stand in the kitchen making breakfast, or they will be standing outside in a designated spouse area. It says that after being interacted with at least once, or if they're mad at the player, if there's any furniture or decorations in the house, the NPC will gravitate towards one and stare at it until the next event. And at 10 p.m. they will go to bed. We're going to keep rolling on the sort of character subject and talk about some unused characters. First, we're going to talk about Dick. It appears that Dick is not actually a unique character that was cut. His sprite sheet is exactly the same as Willie's. Concerned Ape tweeted that at one point before the game was released, Willie's name was Dick. So it's pretty safe to say that's exactly what he is. They simply changed the name to Willie. Next is Dana. She has the same sprite sheet as Penny. In the same tweet, or at least the same thread, Concerned Ape once again confirmed that Dana was Penny's original name. Keeping on track with our NPCs, let's talk about the wizard for a second. He is a character that is full of different lore and information, and he has his own little conspiracy theory about is he the father to a certain character. One of the things he does is that in every festival map, he can be found. And if he's found, he has unique dialogue. The interesting thing, and why this is sort of designated as unused/cut content, is sometimes he's out of bounds of the map, and thus inaccessible to the player without cheats. We're going to go over some of the dialogue that can be found if you were to cheat out to go talk to him. At the Egg Festival, he says, and what about raw lizard egg sprinkled with blackened marrow? At the Flower Dance, he says, you shouldn't be up here. At Spirit's Eve, the affairs of mundane folk matter little to me, but the elementals like a chance to see you up close. It was for them that I created this silly maze. And finally, at the Festival of Ice, sneaking off to visit my weird tower? You're odd for a mundane. The wizard gives you access to a lot of very interesting lore, as I said, and really the whole magic side of Stardew Valley when it comes to the combat, among other things, is very, very interesting to me. It's a part of a game that I honestly haven't fully explored myself. And that's going to kind of lead us into some of the unused items and weapons that can be found within the game. First up is an unused bus ticket. This was originally going to be used in an extended version of the intro sequence. Along with this, we also have an unused interior to the bus that the player would have been on. Next, we're going to talk about unobtainable weapons. All the information I could find is stuff that is prior to the 1.6 release, so it's possible that in future updates we see these weapons, or that even, if I pick the wrong day to upload this, which is going to be this Sunday, and they decide to update it, this could already be out of date. There's two kinds of unobtainable weapons, those that are still completely unavailable, and those that are now obtainable, however they have different stats than what was listed. So first we're going to talk about the rapier. The rapier is a sword that is unavailable to the player. It has a damage of 15 to 25, it adds +2 speed, and would sell for about 300. Next is the Galaxy Slingshot. It does 4 times the damage of the average slingshot, but uses the same kind of ammo. It doesn't have any stat buffs, and it would not be able to be sold. Next, these are the formerly unobtainable weapons that have different stats. First things first is Alex's Bat. It has a damage of 1 to 3, and has a sell price of 50, which is different than the price that you can purchase it for in the game currently. Its bonus stat is +5 to weight. Next is Elliot's Pencil. This is labeled as a dagger within the game. It has a damage of 1 to 3, and this is where it gets a little ridiculous. The stat boosts are weight +5, and speed 154. It would sell for 700. Now, once again, different than the base game, and the same is for Leah's Whittler. It's also listed as a dagger, once again, has a damage of 1 to 3, and has a speed increase of 154, a weight increase of 5, and a $700 asking price, which once again, very different from what we see in the final game. It seems that all of these unused weapons have a base damage of 1 to 3 as sort of a placeholder. It's possible, something we've seen a lot in games like this when it comes to their cut content and how they sort of implement features and how some features that they plan on adding are in the game files early on, but they're not fully complete. They'll put in stat lines that aren't representative of what you would finally get. So the damage of 1 to 3 is sort of a placeholder, and the same can be said for the insane speed boosts with all of these. So we have Sam's old guitar, same damage ratio, and a speed boost of 1 and a weight of 5. Next, Harvey's mallet, same thing, but with the insane speed upgrade of 158. The other ones include Maru's wrench, Penny's fryer, Seb's lost mace, Haley's iron, and Abby's planchette. Most of these have completely different stats than their final version, as I said earlier, and the reason I didn't go over them individually is because a vast majority of them have insane speed boosts, the same amount of damage, but it's just interesting to see how these were most likely test versions of the items, just to see how they held up and for balancing testing. Basically to see, well, what if we give it an insane amount of speed? Okay, maybe we should cut it to here, this and that, sort of to play around with it. With these different weapons, it reminds me of all the different, I guess you could say, paths you can take in this game, despite it not really being an open world thing in the traditional sense. But there's different skills that you can go after, different things you can upgrade, whether it's combat, whether it's farming, whether it's fishing. There's a lot of different paths you can take in the game, and subsequently, different types of skills. The next thing we're going to talk about is unused skill-based titles. Currently in the game, the highest level you can reach is 25. Thus, all of these skill titles that are 26 and beyond are unavailable to the player. First, we have the Agriculturalist. This has a minimum level of 26. Next, at 28, is the Crop Master. And finally, at 30 is the Farm King. The reason these are unattainable is because of how the game calculates your level. This would include a luck level, which is not included in the game. The formula is basically this: farming level, plus fishing level, plus foraging level, plus combat level, plus mining level, and then plus luck level, divided by 2. Last thing we're going to go over is a bunch of unused icons for food. I'll put a bunch of them on screen here, but a lot of them are meat-related items. This is because at one point in time, it was possible to kill and then butcher your farm animals for meat. However, Concerned Ape would say that the reason this was removed during the beta is because it clashed too much with the tone of the game being so lighthearted. And we can actually see that the steak icon was repurposed for the bug steak. And that is all for the cut content of Stardew Valley. I really hope you guys enjoyed this video, something I'm glad to cover, and really I'm very interested in covering the lore of Stardew Valley and some of the theories behind different relationships between characters, as well as just the general lore of the game. So let me know if that's something you want to see in the future. Thank you again so much for watching. I appreciate every single one of you, and I hope you have a good morning or evening or, whatever.